Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is part 28 of TAFSEER Al-SAADI. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين. O you who believe, seek help through patience and prayer, for Allah is with those who are patient. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala azza wa jal commands the believers to seek help in their religious and worldly affairs bis-sabri was-salah, through patience and prayer. Patience means controlling oneself in the face of what which one dislikes. Patience means controlling oneself in the face of that which one dislikes. That is of three types: patience in obedience to Allah so that you will do it; patience in refraining from disobedience to Allah so that you will not do it; and patience in accepting the decree of Allah when it is hard, so that you will not resent it. Patience is a great help in all matters, and there is no way for one who is not patient to achieve his goals, especially with regard to acts of worship that are difficult and are to be done regularly, because they require a great deal of patience to bear the hardship involved. If the one who does these acts of worship adheres to patience, he will attain success. But if he is deterred by difficulty and hardship and does not have the patience to persist in these acts of worship, he will not achieve anything, and he will be deprived. Similarly, the sin for which one has a strong inclination and which is within one's means is something that cannot be resisted except by means of great patience, resisting one's inclination for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, and by seeking Allah's help to protect one from it, for it is one of the greatest temptations and is also a very difficult test, especially if it is ongoing. In such cases, willpower and physical strength grow weak, and it may lead to resentment unless one resists it by means of patience, unless one resists it by means of patience for the sake of Allah, and puts one's trust in Him, turning to Him and expressing one's constant need for His help. Therefore, we know that patience is something that people need. In fact, they are in desperate need of it in all situations. Hence, Allah has enjoined it and tells us that He is Inna Allah ma'as sabirin, with those who are patient. That is, He is with those for whom patience is second nature. He is with them in the sense of helping. He is with them in the sense of helping and guiding them. Thus, hardships and difficulties become easy for them. They become able to cope with any serious matter, and nothing is difficult for them. This kind of being with is indicative of Allah's help, is indicative of Allah's love, help, support, and closeness, and it is a great privilege that is bestowed upon those who are patient. If those who are patient did not have any virtue other than the fact that Allah is with them, that would be sufficient honor for them. As for being with, in a general sense, it means that Allah is with us by His knowledge and power, as Allah Azza wa Jal says, quote, He is with you wherever you may be, end quote. Surah Al-Hadid, Quran chapter 57 verse 4. This is general in meaning and applies to everyone. Allah enjoins seeking help through prayer, because prayer is the foundation of the faith and the light of the believers. It is a connection between the slave and his Lord. If a person's prayer is complete, including every obligatory and sunnah action, and it is done with the presence of mind, that is its essence, and it is done with the presence of mind, that is its essence. When the individual begins to pray, feeling that he is indeed standing before his Lord, standing like a well-disciplined slave, focusing on everything that he says and does, fully immersed in conversing with his Lord and calling upon Him, then his prayer is most certainly one of the greatest helps in all one's affairs. Prayer restrains one from shameful and evil acts, because this focus in prayer will lead him to comply with the commands of his Lord and heed his prohibitions. This is the prayer through which Allah has enjoined. This is the prayer through which Allah has enjoined us to seek help in all our affairs. وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتَلُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٌ بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. Do not say of those who are slain in the way of Allah, they are dead. Nay, they are alive, although you do not perceive it. When Allah issued the command to seek help through patience in all affairs, He gave an example of a matter in which one may seek help through patience, namely jihad for His sake. It is the best of physical acts of obedience and the most difficult for people, because in and of itself it is tough, and because it may lead to death and loss of life, for people usually are attached to this world, so they want to live and attain the means of survival. So all their activities are for the purpose of survival and are aimed at warding off what is contrary to it. It is well known that the wise individual does not give up what he loves unless it is for something even better. Hence Allah tells us that the one who is killed for His sake when fighting so that the word of Allah may be supreme and His religion may prevail, and not for any other purpose, is not missing out on the life that he loves. Rather, he has attained a life that is more perfect than what you may think or imagine. The martyrs, quote, are alive with their Lord, receiving provision, rejoicing in what Allah has bestowed upon them out of His bounty, sharing glad tidings that for those who have yet to join them, of those whom they left behind, they will have no fear, nor will they grieve, rejoicing in the favors and bounties of Allah, rejoicing in the favors and bounties of Allah, and at the awareness that Allah will not cause the reward of the believers to be lost. End quote. Surah Al-Imran, Quran chapter 3, verses 169 to 171. Is there anything greater than this life of the martyrs? Is there anything greater than the life of the martyrs that includes closeness to Allah Azza wa Jal, physical enjoyment in the form of delicious food and drink, and spiritual enjoyment, which is joy, jubilation, and the end of fear and grief. This is a life in Al-Barzakh. This is a life in Al-Barzakh, the period between death and the resurrection, that is more perfect than the life of this world. In fact, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us that the souls of the martyrs are in the bodies of green birds that drink from the rivers of paradise and eat from its fruits. Then they go back to the lamps that are suspended from the throne. In this verse, there is the greatest encouragement of jihad for the sake of Allah and being steadfast and patient in jihad. If people were aware of the reward of those who are killed for the sake of Allah, no one would stay behind. But the lack of certainty is what makes their resolve fails. But the lack of certainty is what makes their resolve fail, makes them sleep more, and causes them to miss out on immense rewards. How could it be otherwise when Allah Azza wa Jal says, quote, Allah has purchased from the believers their lives and their wealth, in return for which paradise will be theirs. In return for which paradise will be theirs. They fight in His cause, and they slay and are slain. End quote. Surah At-Tawbah, Quran chapter 9, verse 111. If a man had 1,000 souls and lost them one by one for the sake of Allah, that would be insignificant in comparison to his great reward. Hence, after seeing with their own eyes the reward of Allah, the martyrs would wish to return to this world so that they might be killed again and again for his sake. This verse indicates that there is bliss and torment in al-barzakh, as is confirmed in so many texts. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. We will certainly test you with something of fear and hunger and loss of property, lives and crops, but give glad tidings to those who patiently persevere. الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Who say when afflicted with calamity, to Allah we belong, and to Him is our return. أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. They are the ones on whom blessings and mercy from their Lord are bestowed, and they are the ones who are guided. Here Allah tells us that He will inevitably test His slaves with all sorts of trials and tribulations in order to distinguish the sincere from the liars and the impatient from the patient. This is His way with His slaves, because if times of ease were to persist for people of faith without any trials, it would not be clear who is who, and that would lead to mischief. The wisdom of Allah dictates that good people should be distinguished from bad people. The purpose of tests is not to cause the believers to lose their faith or turn away from their religion, for Allah will not let the faith of the believers go to waste. But in this verse, He tells us that He will test His slaves بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ, with something of fear of their enemies, وَالْجُوعِ, and hunger. That is, He will test them with a little of these things, because if He tested them with extensive fear or hunger, they would be destroyed. But the purpose of tests is to purify, not to destroy. وَنَقَصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ, and loss of property. This includes everything that may befall wealth and property, such as vermin, drowning, and other types of loss, or the seizing of wealth by evildoers, such as unjust rulers, bandits, and the like. وَالْأَنفُسِ, lives. That is loss of loved ones, such as children, relatives, and friends. It also includes various kinds of diseases that may affect the individual or one of his loved ones. وَالثَّمَرَاتِ, and crops, that is grains and fruits of palm trees and other kinds of trees and plants, because of intense cold, hail, burning, plagues of locusts, and so on. These things will inevitably happen, because the all-knowing, all-aware has told us of it, and it happened as He foretold. When it happens, people respond in one of two ways: either impatience or patience. The one who is impatient suffers two calamities: the loss of what he loves, which is the calamity that he has been stricken with, and loss of something greater than that, which is the reward for obeying Allah's command to be patient. Thus he incurs loss and deprivation of reward, and whatever he has of faith decreases. He misses out on patience, acceptance, and gratitude, and he becomes resentful, which is indicative of lack of faith. As for the one whom Allah enables to be patient when calamities occur, he controls himself and stops himself developing any resentment that could be reflected in his words or deeds. He seeks reward for it from Allah, and he knows that the reward he will attain for his patience is greater than the calamity that has befallen him. And he knows that the reward he will attain for his patience is greater than the calamity that has befallen him. In his case, the calamity turns into a blessing. In his case, the calamity turns into a blessing because it becomes a means of attaining something better and more beneficial for him than what he lost. So he obeys the command of Allah and earns reward. Hence Allah Azza wa Jal says, but give glad tidings to those who patiently persevere. وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. That is, give the glad tidings that they will be rewarded without measure. Those who are patient are those who attain these great glad tidings and immense gifts. Then Allah describes them. Quote, who say when afflicted by calamity, calamity is anything that causes mental anguish or physical harm or both, such as the things mentioned above. Inna lillahi, to Allah we belong. That is, Allah owns us and we are under His control. We have no control over our own selves and property at all. If we are tested with regards to some of it, then the Most Merciful has decreed something concerning His slaves and their property as He wills. So there should be no objection to Him. Rather, it is part of being a true slave of Allah, ubudiyya, to realize that the calamity has been decreed by the Sovereign, the Most Wise, who is more merciful to him than he is to himself. This gives him a sense of contentment and acceptance of Allah's decree, which makes him grateful to Allah for decreeing for his slave that which is good for him, even if he does not realize it. In addition to the fact that we belong to Allah, we will return to Him. We will return to Him on the day of resurrection, when He will requite each person in accordance with his deeds. So if we show patience and seek reward, we will find our reward waiting for us with Him. But if we are impatient and resentful, our share will be nothing but resentment and loss of reward. Knowing that we are slaves of Allah and will return to Him is among the greatest means of attaining patience. Ulaika, that is, the ones who have this characteristic of patience as described above, alayhim salawatun min rabbihim wa rahmah, are the ones on whom blessings and mercy from the Lord are bestowed. That is, His praising them and highlighting their high status. His mercy is great. By His mercy towards them, He enables them to be patient, by virtue of which they will attain a perfect reward. وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُهْتَدُونَ, and they are the ones who are guided and who know the truth. They know that they belong to Allah and that they will return to Him, so they act accordingly, thus showing patience for the sake of Allah. This verse indicates that the one who is not patient will have the opposite of what they have. This implies that he is condemned by Allah and will be punished. It is also indicative of misguidance and loss. How great is the difference between the two types of people? How little is the trouble that the patient may have to bear, and how great is the trouble that the impatient will face. These two verses refer to training oneself to deal with calamity before it happens, so as to take things easier when it does happen. They also tell us what his response should be when calamity strikes, which is to be patient. How to help oneself develop patience, and what those who are patient will have of reward. And what those who are patient will have of reward. We also learn that the situation of the one who is impatient is the opposite of the situation of the one who is patient. These trials and tests have been Allah's way with those who have gone before. These trials and tests have been Allah's way with those who have gone before, and you will find no change in Allah's way. Quran chapter 33 verse 62. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.